Hi guys, I wanted to bring you a new episode that's not a battle report this time. Next week we're going to get a new edition of the game, and I have been given the privilege of doing a preview of Undying Dynasties. So I wanted to start my review by looking at the Paths of Magic, specifically Path of Sand. With the changes to Magic in December, a lot of players had difficulty getting the most of this lore, and the change didn't match well with the newly designed Soul Conduit. To solve these problems, a reduction on casting value on most spells was the preferred solution, along to a change in the attribute. So let's give a look to the new attribute. The main change is that instead of the damaging part of the attribute, now we can heal any model within 6 inches instead. We can potentially get even more resurrections now than before, but it will require harder positioning. While I will miss the offensive part of the attribute, I know my opponents won't. Some of them ended up scratching their heads, asking me how my magic was damaging their models once engaged in combat. There is also a limitation on the number of wounds you can recover on characters and large monsters. Let's speak about the signature spell now. Its basic range was reduced to 18 inches, while the damaging part was eliminated, but the base casting value was reduced by 5. I am not too fond of this change because it will limit the use of the signature spell, which in my opinion must be as versatile as possible. Similarly, Cursed Blade's range was limited to 18 inches and the casting value was reduced to 5. The boosted version of the spell remains unchanged. While the possibility of 2 dicing this spell doesn't change, it now opens the option of casting it with only 1 die. Our new number 2 spell now is Desiccation, while the old Protection is gone. Desiccation itself didn't suffer any changes, and now the interesting changes begin. Smiting, or number 3 spell, its range was reduced to 18 inches, and now you have to choose between multiple shots and +1 attack, but the casting value is reduced to 7. This was one of the most needed changes in my opinion, because now we can 2-dice the spell, with little chance of failure. The boosted version retains the 12 inches aura, but the casting value was reduced by 2. And for our number 4 spell, we have a new spell, Divine Judgment. This spell is quite similar to how the casket worked in early versions. 36 inches of range, and the affected model has to make a leadership test with an additional die, and for each point it fails the test, it suffers a wound with no armor save. There is also a boosted version that lets you affect multiple targets as long as you roll a 3+ on a die. The casting value of the basic version is 8 and the boosted version only 10. This will let us retain some of the ranged damage we lost with the change to the signature spell. This spell can easily slay models outside the general or the battle standard bearer aura, so it will force enemy to clump together, making it easier for us to chaff them up. Our number 5 spell, Shifting Sand, and the number 6, Ancient Glory, don't suffer any changes. As you can see now, the casting value of most spells went down, our ranged offensive stays more or less the same, and we have a greater flexibility in choosing the targets of our healing. Let's speak briefly about Lore of Light, one of the most popular lores, and we did use it a lot too, suffers some changes. The ones that affect us the most are 2. First, the attribute no longer grants sacred attacks. Second, and the most important one, Blinding Speed grants just a +3 to initiative and weapon skill, and no longer weapon skill 10 and initiative 10. This will make the spell actually stack with our lords instead of replacing them. It will also make other armies unable to reach high weapon skill easily, making our fighting lords even better, something they really needed. Finally, Path of Death didn't suffer any changes. In our magic items, one of them suffered a small change and 3 of them were completely reworked. The Death Mask got its price increased to 35, but now it negates the VSB or the General, inspiring presence from the start of the combat phase. This means it will work also on the fear test, not only on the break test, improving it slightly. As a side note, the Screaming Sword can also be used in mounted models now, so it will be possible to have a fear-causing Harbinger or Architect on chariots now. The Sandstorm Cloak got completely reworked, and now it grants hard target to the wearer and the unit it joins. One important difference is it now can be used by mounted characters, like a Pharaoh on a Royal Sphinx, a character in a unit of chariots, or by a wizard mounting the Arc of Ages. The cost of the item is 30 points. Another item that got completely reworked is the Book of the Dead. It now costs 50 points for a Lord and 35 for a Hero, and reduced the casting value of spells from the Lord of Sand by 1. Additionally, the wearer heals 1 additional wound with the attribute, but characters and large target don't benefit from this. This makes for an interesting alternative for the Book of Arcane Power, and with either of the books we can easily cast most of our spells on 2 dice. As you already know, the Unyielding Standard is gone. In its place we have the Banner of the Entombed. It costs 65 points, making it only available to the Battle Standard bearer, and in a 24-inch radius it grants a +1 to the ambushing roll, and models using Underground Ambush scatter only 1d6 inches. This item makes Underground Ambush considerably more reliable and lets units like Swarm or Scorpions more viable as chaff, since they won't scatter 10 or 12 inches away. The limited radius is its main downside, because in my experience a lot of the underground ambushing units want to appear far away from your main units, but at least that want to use the underground ambushing units to hit the flanks or rear of combat units, it's a really good item. The need of a BSB to take it makes it not as appealing, but we already worked on a new rule for the Undead BSB, which sadly won't be in this version of the game. So on version 1 we will probably see this item more commonly than now. I will speak about this change a bit later. For now, let's speak about characters. The Pharaoh first. The main change to this model is an increase in weapon skill by 1, and its price is now 15 points more. Not a big change, and it probably means that the people who used it before will be happy, and the ones who didn't probably won't take him anyways. Our Hierarch suffered little change. Its base cost is 5 points less, and the upgrade cost only 30, making the choice between Hierarchs and Acolytes harder. A good change, especially considering the new Book of the Dead. The Nomarch, or second combat character, got its price reduced by 15, so it costs only 100 now. Now there is a clear difference between the Nomarch and the Pharaoh. He also got the option to mount a Royal Sphinx. We will speak about mounted characters later. The Acolyte is our only character who remains the same. The Harbinger cost remains the same, but instead of Undying Will, he grants hatred to his unit, except mounts. And as you can expect, the Architect lost Artisan's Wrath, but he got 20 points cheaper too. And the Master Mason upgrade cost 5 points less. His role now is more focused on constructs. Additionally, Mason's Monagery got limited to up to 6 Ushabti. The change to these last 2 models will help create a better balance in use between them. And to round up the discussion on characters, let's speak about mounts options. Let's start with the Royal Sphinx. The model itself got access to Stomp, and the Pharaoh can take it for 5 more points. As I commented before, the nomads can take the Royal Sphinx as a choice for only 200 points. These changes will make the Sphinx slightly more versatile and accessible, but it remains an niche unit which combines the stats of a monster and the general buffing abilities of a pharaoh. The Arc of Ages, which was considered too vulnerable based on feedback, got its wounds increased to 5. Now it can be one-shotted by war machines at least. Additionally, its ward increased by 1 if the Hierophant is the one mounting it. The price for the Hierarch is 170 points and for Acolytes 180. At least for me, the Arc seems like a more interesting choice now, especially considering the reduced range of some of our spells, and the fact that we can always heal the caster instead of the target unit, so we can cast buffs and keep healing the Arc. And the third mount option that suffered a change was the Chariot. Costs were changed a little, and the Nomads and Pharaoh can get a Chariot for only 35 points. On the other hand, Harbingers and Architects can get Chariots for 50 points, since they get an upgrade in wounds. Let's speak about core choices now. First of all, skeletons were divided into two groups, normal skeleton and skeleton archers. Additionally, the leadership of all skeletons was reduced to 4. Skeleton units start at 20 models and can grow up to 60 now. The cost of the minimum sized unit is now only 80 points. While cheaper and bigger units of skeletons probably aren't attractive enough, the changes were made considering the new rule for the battle standard bearer on Undead. This rule will be implemented in the next version, but it limits the amount of wounds a unit can crumble to 12 minus the number of ranks a unit has, with a maximum of 3. So a unit of skeletons with more or 4 complete ranks will crumble 9 and 1 less from the VSB. This will finally enable skeleton warriors to work as tarpit as in other living armies. Skeleton archers, on the other hand, maintain the minimum size of 10, but they are limited to 30 models. They come equipped with bows and light armor. The limitation on the maximum size of the skeleton archer unit was done to give the skeleton warriors a clearer role as a defensive unit and not be overshadowed by skeleton archers on this role. While I will miss my unit of 50 archers, I think this change will be for the better. Skeleton cavalry remains the same, with just a slight change in name to one of its equipment options. Currently, they perform their function quite well, but their equipment options are not considered attractive enough. We hope to fix this in the near future. Chariots remain the same. And now let's go into special. The initial cost of a unit of Necropolis Guard was reduced by 10 points, but the cost per model went up 1 point. Remember that not only skeleton will benefit from the VSB effect, so bigger units of Necropolis Guard will be even harder to kill. Swarms rule remained the same, but they will benefit from the new banner. The cost of unarmed Shaptis was reduced to 110 points for 3 models and 37 points for each additional Shapti, but the cost of paired weapon was increased to 5 and halberds to 10. The net result is that halberds are 2 points more expensive than before, and hand weapon Shaptis and bow Shaptis cost 3 points each. Halberd Shaptis won't seem like such a dominant choice, especially considering with our more reliable magic, Necropolis Guard will be far easier to heal and buff. The new Book of the Dead can be used to heal the Shaptis 1 more wound, but Necropolis Guard will still heal far more. Cataracts and Sand Scorpions remain unchanged. but remember that both units will heal 2 wounds with the Book of the Dead. Vultures were far too good in their role as chaff, so their minimum size got increased to 3, the base price increased to 75, and their fly speed reduced to 9. And they are still probably one of the best chaff units out there. Battle Sphinx didn't suffer any change, but if you have been following the sneak peeks from other armies, you might have noticed a limitation on poison and war machines, which is always good for a monster. A meta-chief buff is as good as a buff in the rules itself. And finally, the Sandstalker. This guy got just a slight change in the rules of its shooting attack, making it roll against initiative instead of the highest initiative in the unit. This means that in units with characters, you will be rolling against the rank and file troops, but more importantly, against rhythm monsters you will be shooting against the monster initiative, not the character. So a dragon mounted by an elf will be wounded on 5s, not 6. And another indirect buff is the fact that the Gem of Fortune no longer works on large targets. With both these changes, the Stalkers will be formidable monster hunters and rhythm monster hunters in my opinion. Oh, and they can be healed 1 more wound thanks to the Book of the Dead. And now let's see what happened to the units in the rare section. So let's start with the Winged Reapers. Their base cost was reduced to 150 and 70 points per additional model, and they also gained fear. They lost Necromantic Aura as a rule, but gained the option to buy it back or get autonomous, one or the other for 20 points. Finally, the cost of halberds increased to 12 points, and they can be healed 2 wounds with the Book of the Dead. The Colossus is one of the few models that had to be toned down in our book. In this case, the base price was increased to 195, and the cost of paired weapon was increased to 10. On the right side, the cost of the Giant Aspen Bow was reduced to only 10, and it works like a ballista now, with strength 6. The Dread Sphinx is one of the models that changes the most. It got turned into a monster, its flying speed got reduced to 6, lost Devastating Charge, but gained 1 point in initiative thanks to the use of paired weapons. The number of attacks remained the same, but the most important changes is multi-wound 2 against monsters and rhythm monsters, and strength 6. But the cost increased considerably to 275 points. So in summary, it got better against infantry, monsters and rhythm monsters, but far more costly and with the same durability. The catapult got a slight reduction in cost to 125, but it has a minimum range of 12 like all other catapults now, and the crew has Leadership 4. The casket of Fatep was completely redesigned and now it has 2 important rules. Divine Light, which grants +1 to channel on your own turn, and -1 to cast to enemy wizards within 36 inches. Also, when the model is removed, all units within 12 inches suffer 3d3 strength 1 armor piercing attacks. The second important rule is Fatep's Curse. It lets the casket cast Divine Judgment as a bounce spell with power level 4 in any turn it hasn't moved. That covers all the changes to Undying Dynasty in this new version of the game. The next release will be the last in a long time, so I will ask all of you to please playtest so we can iron out the last few remaining problems. And don't forget to have fun while doing it. I hope you had a good time listening to me, and please leave all comments, suggestions and critiques here or on the Undying Dynasty forums. Bye!